right, good morning and happy Friday to all of you who have joined us. You are so welcome. You are now at Evergreen State College, Tacoma campus, but also Olympia campus. I think JJ's bringing us together from all campuses to talk about the justice involved. We're so excited about the program that he has planned today. That song you just heard from Sweet Honey in the Rock, Bernice Johnson Reagan, formerly the director of the Smithsonian Institute. And her work is known throughout the civil rights era as the background music to many of the struggles of the civil rights time. And so I think it's just so lively, and give your hands to struggle, because when we talk about the justice involved, we are all impacted by this work, and we are impacted by those who are justice involved. And so everybody knows somebody whose family or somebody's been impacted in some way. And if we think about it, we really need to all lean in to make our community whole again from many of the activities that have occurred. And I'm thinking specifically in Tacoma, Hilltop, where we had a lot of gang activity through more than a decade. And I was blessed to have met so many of those young men as students at Monroe Correction Facility, where I was a teacher of sociology and human development. And with that experience, came to know some of the most brilliant minds of people who had time to really think and read material and become critical and creative thinkers around how to change and build a better society. So what are we doing on the outside to meet that quest, so that when folks are coming out, we have a better society for them to come to? We have better conversations, we have better dialogues, we are able to check our own anger and manage it. We are now starting to have conversations about how our young people can be healed and move forward into their adult life, fully realizing their human potential. And I think that's what this is about today. We're looking at not just the justice involved, but looking at a society in which we can create a better way of being for those who are transformed by the justice involved. And today, I want to bring to you JJ, who, that's an endearing term, JJ. He's James Jackson. And James Jackson, JJ, comes to us from the Olympia campus, and he's hopefully spending more and more time with us in Tacoma. If you have anything to do with the prison system, incarceration, formerly incarcerated, you probably have come to know this gentleman. He's an activist inside and outside, working with people to navigate their way out and into education. We know that education is a place where people can continue their transformation so that they can be more participatory in this society. And so I just want to honor JJ today, thank him for setting up this program, and welcome him to this program today, this format at Evergreen State College. JJ, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marsha. And I just want to say the music touched something in my DNA, and I'm like really emotional right now. I was just getting emotional. So I know that it was just tapping something deep in me. And so thank you for that music. And so I want to start us off today with acknowledgements, and the acknowledgement that I'm going to read was written by our own Eirik Steinhoff, who is an English faculty, and I had the honor of studying with IRIC in the Gateways for Incarcerated Youth program in my senior year here at Evergreen. And so I'm gonna read this off to you. We wanted to start the day acknowledgement of stolen land, stolen labor, and stolen lives. We are scattered far and wide these days, convening through Zoomscape, but most of us here today are dialing in from the western half of Washington. Those of us who are not indigenous are visitors here, and we want to begin by acknowledging the fact, by recognizing that these treaties that ceded these lands are still in dispute, and by stating that it is our responsibility to never forget this as we pay our respects to the elders of the tribes of the Salish Sea, who are the traditional caretakers of these lands. We have a lot of work to do in this respect. We also want to acknowledge stolen labor. Not everybody who is not from here came here voluntarily. Many people, including many people of color and particularly Black people, had their labor stolen from them as part of the process of building the culture we live in right now. We also need to remember that many women of all races had and still have their care work, their labor of social reproduction taken for granted. We wish to acknowledge these labors and also want to propose that we never forget the pain and suffering that those so rarely is included in history books. Even as it lives in our communities, that continues to bear the brunt of these histories. And we want to acknowledge stolen lives. Lives ended too soon by what Ruth Gilmore calls an unequal distribution of premature death. In particular, we want to pay homage to George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, and countless others who have lost their lives to the bigotry that leads to an ongoing personal, mob, and state violence. And we want to pay homage to the many others who have died prematurely as a consequence of these structures. We started to hear it said about 5 years ago as part of the movement for Black lives. And we may need to remind ourselves for a little while yet. When Black lives matter, everybody's lives better. Having acknowledged stolen land, stolen labor, and stolen lives, I want to also acknowledge the critical context which we in, a crisis compounded by catastrophe overtaken by an emergency exasperated by a disaster. Boxed together here though, through Zoom, in the midst of the planetary crisis of global warming and economic crisis of late capitalism, a public health crisis of unprecedented scope in the shape of the COVID pandemic, a political and racial justice crisis that will be sure to define this epoch. And last but not least, an existential crisis, a leadership crisis, a vision crisis at our beloved institution, the Evergreen State College. As an English major, as someone who has the badge that authorizes me to do things with words, I want to humbly draw our attention to the fact that the word crisis derives from the Greek word krisis, which emerges in the medical context, where it signifies not only great urgency, that's the sense we still use, but also the possibility of agency. The crisis is the moment where the person diagnosing the disease needs to act swiftly and decisively. It's with that sense that I want to close these opening remarks with an acknowledgement of the crises that surround us in all their shapes and forms, but also with a gentle reminder that crisis signifies not only urgency, but also agency. And so I thought that acknowledgement is so powerful and everything. And so I know it's long, but I just wanted to share that with you. And so Trey, can I get the next screen? Okay, so, and then we'll get, Trey, after that, we'll go back to that opening screen. So here's a language statement that was written for presentations at NASPA that we did. When looking to engage with system impacted students from this marginalized population, please refrain from using stigmatizing language. Words such as offender, inmate, felon, ex-felon, and convict suggest that people are no more than their conviction. Those negative labels only serve to dehumanize and re-traumatize the students we serve. We recommend humanizing language such as incarcerated people, formerly incarcerated people, returning citizens, and justice-involved people, which centers the person, not the conviction. Okay, so I just want to thank Tacoma Day for giving us this platform for this important conversation. And I want to introduce myself. My name is James Jackson, as you all already know. You can call me JJ though. And then I have on my notes here status, right? So my status, right, which is integral to this conversation today, is that of a formerly incarcerated person. I wear a scarlet F, right? But that said, today, my position, my professional position, is that of a statewide reentry navigator. And so I belong to a statewide network of people on the inside of prisons, on the outside of prison, that provide education, navigation, and continued support to students as they go through their college careers. Next, I would like to introduce the program that we are building called Reentry Scholars. Reentry Scholars is a student support program. And what we look to do is not only navigate students through college process, but that continued support. And so what that looks like is building student support programs like Reentry Scholars. And all my contact info is in there. I can also put that in the thread for anybody, you know, students, formerly incarcerated students, system impacted students like Marcia, you know, put out there. We're all system impacted, right? We're impacted by these systems of control, right? And so any student, anybody that wants to reach out to me, please feel free, and I will talk to you. One of my values is, as in student support, right? If I log a meeting on my calendar for you for an hour, we're gonna sit there for an hour if you want, and we'll talk about other things beyond education, right? Anything that you wanna talk about. And I enjoy that part of the job, really. That's one of my favorite parts is talking to my students and listening, talking and listening, right? And so, all right, and today, I want this conversation to be like interactive, right? And so if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and Trey is gonna help me. I'm not very good at multitasking, you all, so Trey is gonna help me monitor the chat, and maybe Marcia, if you could help me do that as well, that would be great. All right, thank you. So we will go ahead and move on to slide 3. Thank you, Trey. So today we will barely scratch the surface of the numbers and how we got here. This presentation is intended to give you an overview of mass incarceration. And for those that want to dig deeper, I will leave you with some resources to do so. And so we'll start out looking at the numbers, right? And then we'll dig into a little bit to how we got here. And then we'll talk about prison and reentry education a little bit. So really scratching. It looks like we might have a little more time though. So I encourage you all to ask questions, right? Because we got a little bit of time to fill. And so, okay, so let's go on to the next slide, please, Trey. So the whole pie from an organization called prisonpolicy.org. This is a really great resource of information, and it's always being updated. everything. Any student doing research on mass incarceration, I encourage you to go there, right? But there's also a lot of other resources, but this will take you to a treasure trove of information. So let's start with the numbers according to prisonpolicy.org, the whole pie 2020. Prisonpolicy.org is an excellent resource for full up-to-date research articles and information for those looking to strengthen their understanding of mass incarceration and its social implications. There are 2.3 million people incarcerated in jails, prisons, and detention centers in the United States. In the pie, you will notice the breakdown with the biggest slices going to state prisons and local jails. Next in order is youth confinement and immigration detention. So next slide, please, Trey. And so here we're going to talk a little bit about like community supervision, so probation and parole. According to this slice of the pie, there are over 4 million people on some sort of community supervision in this country. Recidivism is strongly related to community supervision. Most people are returned to prison to commit new crimes, but for technical violations of their probation or parole. In Washington State, transitioning people are released with $40 and a bus ticket. Many times conditions of release consist of weekly mental health, drug and alcohol treatment, UAs, and probation check-in appointments. Transitioning people are expected to find housing and employment. If they have no family support, imagine trying to keep up with those expectations with $40, right, in your pocket. I mean, you know, you're trying to keep up with all that. You're trying to get a place to live. You're trying to find employment. $40 in bus, you know, I mean, bus fare is going to eat that in half the week, right? And so it's really a setup in many ways, right? Next slide, Trey. Okay, so the numbers by the millions, right? So check out this information in this graph. People impacted are not just those who land in jails, prisons, or detention centers. Not all felons end up serving time behind bars. Regardless, they are still cast with the felon label. System impacted people are those who have been to jail, prison, and those convicted of felony. They are also their family members. I would even broaden that definition to whole communities who are impacted by over-policing. And also people disappearing from their communities, right? And so, for instance, as of 2012, the US imprisonment rate was 700 people per 1,000. It is still the highest in the world today at 655 per 100,000, while most nations with similar are below 200 per 100,000, and many are below 100 per 100,000. US imprisonment rates for Black men as of 2015 are 2,613 per 100,000. So let that sink in, right? That's a stressful number. I mean, I think that's something like some of the numbers say 1 out of 3 Black men are expected to go to prison. And so next slide, please. And so US incarceration compared to other countries. The United States holds 5% of the world's population, while 25% of the world's prison population. I ask you, does this mean we are less moral as a country whose citizens are prone to crime? Or would this question be better framed as a socioeconomic question? While there may be a morality question here, as you will learn, that question lies in the laps of the policy and lawmakers on both sides of the political aisle. We're going to contextualize those numbers next, but I kind of want to see, like, what do people think? Is this a moral issue, or do you believe it more to be a socioeconomic issue? If anybody wants to answer, if not, we can move on to giving the numbers some context. Somebody said it's a 13th Amendment issue. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay, so next slide, please, Trey. Black and brown bodies. With racial justice continuing to be the most important social issue, one of the most important social issues of our times, it is concerning that we do not hear more about mass incarceration. After Alexander explains in her book, The New Jim Crow or Mass Incarceration, or The New Jim Crow, mass incarceration is the continuation of the bondage of Black bodies, the evolved form of Jim Crow segregation, and the continuation of racial caste in the United States. What jumps out at you in this graph? Does anybody want to throw anything in the chat, an answer? Or I see somebody put in, looks like an issue of social control. Yeah, so it's definitely more about social control and is linked to, social economics in this country. And of course, racism, right? Which is linked as well. So it looks like somebody. So somebody, Melissa Bennett, is saying this is an interesting slide. When I worked with forensic mental health, our native population of incarceration was 10%. I wonder if that, Melissa, is a state number or a nationwide number. That might be some of the discrepancy there. Is that a Washington state or a national number? Regardless, right? I mean, like when you think of the native population as 0.9%, and then it's 10% of prison population. So something just popped in my screen. Excuse me for a sec while I figure out what this is.
I'm not sure that popped up. It was not me, so just ignore it.
Okay, I just wanted to get it out of the way. So, so another Melissa responded, makes me wonder about the difference between incarceration in the prison system and the mental health system. That was in Oregon at just our hospital. Okay, yeah, that's a good question. And so one thing I don't want to do, so I do not want to overlook the numbers of white people impacted by the system because they do get caught up. While poor whites make up the greatest percentage of people incarcerated in the US, the gross racial disparities are evident. Is this because Black people are predisposed to criminal behavior, or could something else be taking place? The facts are that racial groups commit crimes at roughly the same rates. So why are these disparities so great? If anybody wants to comment or add in there, it's kind of a question, and I'm just trying to, get some participation. Okay, Trey, can we go to the next slide? All right, so this is something that we all should be very, very concerned about, because this is really like the next phase of social control. And it stems from like the private prisons starting to get very unpopular, a lot of pushback from people, but they, capitalism and capitalists always find a way to capitalize, right? And so when we have, so some of this came to be through the First Step Act, the national reform policy that passed. But what people aren't looking at, like conservatives or politicians, period, right, are interested in these things, we should be causing to take a little deeper look as to the reason why. So one of the lobbying groups behind this is Koch brothers, right? And they stand to make billions of dollars off these new systems of control, of digital control. So in 2018, Michelle Alexander updated the preface in her book, The New Jim Crow. There she identifies the next step in the evolution of mass incarceration in the United States as the digital prison or surveillance control. Alexander explains, quote, while you may be set free from jail, an expensive monitoring device likely will be shackled to your ankle. A GPS tracking device provided by the private company that may charge you around $300 per month. Even now, 4 corporations earn a combined $200 million in revenue for their e-monitoring services. While free, your movement may be limited, making it difficult or impossible to get or keep a job, attend school, care for your kids, or visit family members, unquote. And communities could become trapped in digital prisons that keep them locked out of neighborhoods where jobs and opportunity can be found. And that was also a quote, part of the quote. And so, I mean, that's something, I get it. It's an easy way for people to get out of prison and be in their families, but we're just really setting ourselves up, for, more control, right? So surveillance in our communities, like, open air prisons, and when I was thinking about this, when I was writing this stuff, or pulling this information out, I was thinking about the reservation system. It really made me think about that. So are we headed for another type of reservation system in our cities? Food for thought, right? I'm gonna look into the chat. And so what I got here, Mark Barrington from Green River College, he identifies over policing. Paul Parif, I believe Black people are over policed. Yes. Paris Miller, what's up, Paris? To keep the business of prison profitable, for sure. That's that's what it's about, right? Part of it. And so, and is it Geneve? I hope I'm not like messing up your name. Layad, I'm sorry. America still sees our slaves as they've always looked. And so you all can see some of this chat too, but that's cool. Can we go to, wait a minute. I had some more to read here for you. All right. Let's see. Give me a second. All right, never mind. I know where I'm at. All right. Next slide, please. Sorry about that. CEOs, employers are called slavers. Nice, from Sharon. Nice. So this next slide is how did we get here? And so I got what I'm about to relay to you all from Understanding Mass Incarceration by James Kilgore, and where he cited these different sources. And so, political reasons, economic reasons, and philosophical reasons. And, the political reasons he outlines from Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, Ruth Gilmore, Golden Gulag. That book right there breaks it all the way down. Ruth Gilmore is not only an activist, but she's a brilliant Black woman and political economist, right? And so both Ruth and Michelle Alexander are tough, right? They really break things down from these different perspectives. And then you have philosophical reasons, the punishment imperative. And so I'm gonna start out. In her book, The New Jim Crow, author Michelle Alexander argues that gains won in the civil rights movement unleashed a wave of white resentment and fear that led to a political backlash. She outlines how conservatives, starting with Nixon, the Nixon administration played into the racial fears of whites to bring them into the GOP. Due to the winds of the civil rights movement and political correctness of colorblindness, politicians could no longer use explicitly racist strategy. Instead, they used the rhetoric of crime, referring to Black people while never mentioning race. A common understanding amongst whites evolved that criminal meant young Black male. The racism of whites was crucial to making mass incarceration viable. And so that was out of the new, kind of obviously did some rewording in there and everything. And so on the other hand, Ruth Gilmore in her book, Golden Gulag, identifies the loss of US manufacturing jobs and corporations looked overseas and south for cheap labor, causing unemployment rates to soar in cities with large African-American communities. To compound this with the rise of neoliberal policymaking that led to shrinking social welfare nets and expanded corporate welfare. While resources for social programs went away, more dollars were directed towards prisons and jails. To exasperate things, politicians began to draw attention to crime while promoting law and order politics. And in The Punishment Imperative by Todd Clear and Natasha Frost, the authors argued that the most important reason for mass incarceration is philosophical, as the country moved away from a philosophy of rehabilitation to one of punishment. The political and public became more punitive. Rather than providing second chances through educational programs, job training, and substance abuse programs, the public called for a system that would incapacitate. This perspective was not only about criminal prosecution, it is about political disenfranchisement. Prison gerrymandering shifted political power away from the urban districts where most Black communities are located to mostly white rural areas. And so what that means, right, is they were stealing those votes in those areas, right? Stealing, the gerrymandering. So stealing that power from that political power from those urban communities. So I am only touching lightly on the depth of analysis these four authors go into in their respective books. I encourage you all to read these books, but don't stop there. Oh, I messed up in my notes here. Don't stop there. Take a swim upstream by referencing the resources in those materials where you will find a treasure chest of information. And so I got that term swimming upstream from Eric Steinhoff in his class. And it's really actually an amazing way to find more materials, right? Through references that these authors pack into these books, right? So there's just like swim upstream to learn more, to find these materials. I love that term, Eric, by the way. Okay, let me see. Is there anybody that has any questions around any of that which I read? And I know that was a little bit long-winded, but I just felt like it was important to say those things just to kind of start understanding how we got here, and really like that there is way more to that than just this, sprinkling of information that I'm giving you. And I'm really hoping that this will encourage you all to take deeper dives. Marcia?
No, let's just see if we have people who have questions.
Yeah.
You can unmute. I see Eric.
It'll be a moment. I'm gonna have to stop the screen share from. I'm glitched out.
Yeah, where do we go from here, right? And when Dr. King asked that question in that book, where he started to be critical of capitalism and the Vietnam War, he was shortly assassinated, right? What happens is when these charismatic leaders start understand that it's also bigger than just race. It's about poor people in general and poor whites, and attempt to bring those groups together. Power elites start to get worried, and then they make moves like assassination, because they know that racism, partisan politics are tools that have so much strength in keeping us, the people, divided. And when I say this, I'm not talking about just one side of the political aisle. Democrats, Republicans, they're all complicit in corrupt political and economic systems, right? They're all complicit, right? The DNC and the RNC. So this ain't a like political side thing for me, right? Because tough on crime politics been going since Nixon, and every president has been identified as using that as part of their platform. And so let's see, do we have? So Paul, I'm wondering if your question is, where do we go from here?
And I just want to let people know, if they did have a comment they wanted to say, you guys should be able to unmute yourselves now. Sorry about that.
Where do we go from here? And so we will definitely talk a little bit about that. So the next slide, please. Okay, so I threw this one in because I thought this was a super important quote. And so I guess I'll go ahead and read this. This racial disparity was by design. A former Richard Nixon domestic policy advisor, John Eltrichman, who helped launch the war on drugs and the related mass imprisonment push, told Dan Baum of Harper's a couple of years ago, quote, "We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or Black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and Blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did," unquote. And so when, a lot of times people want to talk about, and I went through this in my class, unintended consequences of these laws, right? Which is really exactly what they were intended to do. And it's just mass racism, right? So I thought I put this slide in, I thought it relates so much with how we got here, as it highlights the political shenanigans, mass racism and media tactics employed to gain support for mass incarceration. And that was my little note that I had written there. And I will give us a pause for anybody that maybe have a question here or comments. Okay, and so we can go to the next slide, Trey.
JJ, can I jump in real fast? Okay.
Sure.
So good morning, everybody. I'm Jacob Longacre, he, him, his at First Peoples. I just want to point out, we always mark like the Nixon administration and the kind of modern contemporary war on drugs as the starting point, but there's actually a lot of, there's a long history of associating Blackness with drug use. At the turn of the 20th century, when you had actually like wealthy white folks enjoying opium, and then when it started to be used within Black communities, and we saw a push back and an association of drug use with crime and Blackness, right? So a lot of these things, I mean, they just go well back into foundational moments of our nation, where when folks who are non-white start to use and utilize and enjoy things that white people do, then we criminalize them and associate them with, all sorts of negative stereotypes. So it's a really, really long history there of like cocaine and opium and attaching these to Black bodies and criminalizing them along with it.
Yeah, for sure. And, we've seen the same thing happen with powder cocaine and crack, right? The 100 to 1, right? And so, when people were getting caught with crack, right, they were just like slamming them with, 30-year sentences, life sentences and stuff like that and all that. And so what I think why the Nixon administration is really highlighted, because this was that from the civil rights movement into the Black Power movement, they were tripping, right? And they said, we gotta do something to put people back in their place, right? Because, you know, they were afraid of, you know, what could happen. So they used these rhetorical tactics, right, to do that, because it was no longer politically correct to have an outright racist agenda, right? And so they masked it. And I think, oh my goodness, anyway, masked racism article by and why is this happening to me, by Angela Davis. There we go. So and she really highlights that and talks about that, but also throughout the new Jim Crow, right? Michelle Alexander highlights those tools that they used, right? And then, you know, once again, yeah, the Nixon administration, but we also got to remember the 94 crime bill by Democrats, right? That probably did more damage than any of it. And so that's when we got like mandatory minimum sentences, right? Discretion away from the judges, right? And then one of the interesting things, those prosecutors that had all the discretion, they didn't know how to use that discretion. There was no like training manuals for them or anything. And so, you know, and then, so while these laws on the surface don't necessarily identify race, right? It's how they're applied, right? The bias and how they're applied that has really impacted Black communities. Okay, so moving right along, this slide, the new cast, right? And so as you see, 46,000 collateral consequences of a felony conviction. And I put the most important in order, right? So housing discrimination, unemployment, employment discrimination, loss of parental rights, political disenfranchisement. And so like 60 to 70% of those collateral consequences are actually in employment. And so that right there is huge, right? So a felony conviction, or the Scarlet F, relegates people to perpetual second-class citizenship, as Michelle Alexander puts it in her book, The New Jim Crow. She makes a reasonable argument based in the empirical evidence is responsible for a new caste system in the United States. She highlights in her book that while crime rates continue to drop, prison populations are stable. The main driver of this stability is recidivism. High recidivism rates can be directly attributed to the barriers erected by the felon label. Even if a person never returns to prison, they are pushed to the margins, trapped in poverty, condemned by society. For millions of formerly incarcerated system impacted people trapped on the lower rungs of society, this is the reality, right? It's tough, right? And so that being, you know, and I love in The New Jim Crow how Michelle Alexander really talks about the evolution from, well, so the evolution of bondage starting with slavery, right? With Blacks, right? And then the new Jim Crow, and then how we're into into Jim Crow, and then the new Jim Crow. And now we're going into this second phase of the new Jim Crow with these open air digital prisons. It's pretty crazy stuff. Does anybody have anything? Yeah, and Jacob added more into the chat off what he had what they had highlighted. Somebody also put the new and evolving marijuana economy industry, Asian immigrants as well, scapegoat theory. Yeah. So, yeah, Asian immigrants as well. I mean, for sure, right? We know what happened to their communities, you know, the rail workers. And then here in Tacoma, after like the railroads were built and they were settling, the citizens actually uprose and drove them out of town. At the Tacoma History Museum, they had an artist had sketched the pathway on long parchment paper that men on horses and the mob pushed the Asian community out of town. And then we know what happened with the Japanese in World War II. And I also think there's like some people maybe are treated different from different Asian countries. I think some people from like Vietnam, Cambodia, the Philippines, and some of them East Asian countries are looked down on, while maybe some Asians from like China and Japan are, you know, like the more accepted class. So, but if anybody wants to like add more about that, me on anything I just said with the Asian stuff, please do. And if any of you all here have any input or any corrections that you would like to highlight, you're not going to hurt my feelings. And so we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so recidivism versus education. And so, you know, post-secondary education contributes to successful reentry. Participants describe it as transformative. Those who participate are more likely to gain employment with livable wage and reduces chances of recidivism. Education reduces chances of recidivism by 48%. I need to take a drink of water. And so this information here, I mean, I can really apply it to my own experience. And so I'm going to read you what I wrote. For me, post-secondary education while incarcerated showed me that I was capable of learning and could be a successful student. It planted seeds of hope that maybe I could do something different with my life. Due to circumstances, I was unable to complete a degree while incarcerated. But when I got out, I returned to school, and that I did. I firmly believe that it is education and the hope for a better way of life that sustained my reentry. All of the bullet points outlined in this slide for me have proven to be true. Today, I have an education that led to a career in student affairs that provides a living wage. The best part of it is I get to support others with shared experience of poverty, racism, and incarceration to break the chains of poverty, the shackles of racism, and the cycles of recidivism and generational incarceration. And so one thing I want to highlight, I get asked this sometimes, is what do I think is the best way to reduce recidivism? And for me, that is a super simple answer, but will we ever have the public and political will to do this, right? And it is to take that felon label off people after they serve their time, right? I mean, even further, let's get rid of prisons, right? Because really, they're kind of unnecessary, and we're locking up people more for race, for poverty, for mental health, for drug addiction, right? And we did better. Like in the 70s, we were doing better. There was that in the 70s that prisons would soon be obsolete. But then, you know, the powers that be figured out how to use them as a social control mechanism. So I have a question here. Is the DOC on board with educating those who are in prison? It seems like their participation is measured and by degrees rather than full bore. Yeah, so I gotta say that, you know, there is legislation that passed in 2017, and I worked on this as a student called post-secondary education for inmates, right? Got to use the term because it's in that title, right? That opened up Washington state prisons to the 2-year schools. And then through the Obama administration and the Second Chance Pell program, Washington has 3 Pell test sites that are having, you know, mixed successes with them. But I do believe that there are those within the system that have this high value for education, And also, is it going to be the leader of our state, right? So the governor put out a proclamation in 2016 for all state agencies to help in any way they can to reduce recidivism, because it's a huge problem, right? I believe after 5 years, the rate is in the high 60s and low 70s that people return to prison. And then also keep in mind that most people that return are returned on technical violations rather than new crimes. And so that is a huge issue. Yeah, DOC is kind of on board. Yeah, thank you, Miranda. And then Ira here, the Evergreen State College on board with educating those who are in prison and those who have been released, right? And so we're working in that direction. We're really trying to bring Evergreen to our neighboring prisons. You know, that's been a kind of an uphill climb. You know, we had our prison education initiative really backburnered when it was one of the most popular initiatives in the Big Bets process. But what I understand now, a lot of that just comes from lack of understanding. Also, people, you know, right now, I think college leadership, and, you know, I don't want to throw you know, hate or shade or anything, but I understand it because it's a capacity issue a lot too, right? We're in a budget crisis before COVID. And so, you know, college leadership has been scrambling or stressed out, right? And so, you know, I just want to, you know, throw that out there. Let's go to the next slide. We're coming up on the panel here pretty quick. Violations are not considered recidivism, so tracking those numbers are difficult. Yeah, that's something that would be new to me, Miranda, because it's my understanding that most people return on those technical violations, and it's in those numbers. But, you know, all things can be unpacked more, and more learning is always helpful. All right, and thank you, Miranda. And so resources, right? I just want to share some resources with you all. The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, The Golden Gulag by Ruth Gilmore, The Punishment Impairment by Todd Clear and Natasha Frost, Understanding Mass Incarceration by James Kilgore. That book right there by James Kilgore keeps it really plain and simple, but gives you some really good information as to how we got here. And it's a pretty straightforward read. I think another Human Targets by Victor Rios, which is really focused on juveniles, particularly Black and brown boys in Southern California. And so he got a chapter called The Labeling Hype in there that talks about those labels again. Prisonpolicy.org, like I said in the beginning, you can find a treasure trove of different information. And Vera Institute of Justice is doing a lot of work around justice. And so in all kinds of, around education, around mass incarceration and all that. So, and this presentation barely scratches the surface as to the depth of mass incarceration and its socioeconomic ramifications. I encourage you to do your own research. These resources are only the tip of the iceberg, right? And then again, I write, again, take a swim upstream by referencing the resources in these materials where you will find a treasure chest of information. And so, yeah, I encourage people, you know, I can't, you know, we could take probably a 2-day conference to unpack all the information that's available out there to really take a deep dive, but we don't have time for that today. And so next up, Trey, please. And so now we move to our formerly incarcerated student panel brought to you by Reentry Scholars. These amazing students have agreed to share with us. And so I see Gail, I see Paris. Who else is here? We got Aaron Davis, Tim Williamson is here. Let's see, who else do we got? Do we got anybody else? I know we're supposed to have a couple more students show up. And so, but we can get started. It's 11 o'clock and we have an hour for the panel. And so what I usually do with these panels, right, is just ask a set of questions. And I know them in my head, but for some reason, I'm not looking at them right here, but they are. And I know Paris, you know, he let me know this morning, I got it. Thanks for the setup and everything. And so I want to transition over to and let the students introduce themselves that are here for the panel. And we can start with, I'm going to start on my screen here. And so Gail, like to introduce yourself? You're on, yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Hi, I'm Gail. I'm here today because I was incarcerated for the majority of significant amount of time in my life, and I've learned that education is probably the strongest tool that we have to help develop and create change in our society. So that's why I'm here today.
Thank you, Gail. Next on my screen is Paris.
Hi, my name is Paris. I'm a current incarcerated individual. I'm on home monitoring, the digital. Education for me has been my rehabilitation, and it's reshaped the way that I view myself. However, the struggle is people still view me as my old self. So it's a constant struggle with trying to figure out where I fit at in this community. However, you know, I've been successful by learning, and, you know, I currently possess 245 collegiate credits, associates in technology, all while I was incarcerated for 20 years and 6 months.
All right, Paris, thank you. And next in line is Tim.
Hi, my name's Tim Williamson. I'm a student of my senior year here at Evergreen. I was incarcerated pretty much my whole childhood. First time I went to juvie, I was 10 years old, and I was in 5th grade. And then I just kept going back when I was 11, when I was 12, all the way till I was like 16. And then I got a juvenile life sentence, incarcerated to the age of 21. Was doing my time. I graduated high school with a 3.65 GPA. I learned how to weld, work on cars, and I took a gateways program with Evergreen 2013. Got out 2016 on my 21st birthday. Then started going to Evergreen full time in 2017. Education has just been a way for me to prove to myself that I can do what other people my whole life told me I couldn't, and I can rise above, you know, where I came from.
Thank you, Tim. And Aaron, you're on mute there, buddy.
Hello. I didn't hear my name. So yeah, I've just got out of prison a month ago. It was my second time. When I was incarcerated, I just realized that I needed to do something different in my life. And just like Paris and Tim, I decided to refine what I am, and I'm pursuing a career in chemical dependency counseling because I've struggled the last 10 years with meth use and abuse, and then the incarceration that goes along with it. It's a lifestyle I don't want to go back to. I understand that I need to make changes in my life, and you know, getting out of prison and starting college was something that I really embraced. It's you know, JJ, I can't thank you enough for guiding me in the right direction, man. You're a great mentor. Just want to say, you know, to everybody that that's been incarcerated, man, it's something we have to just look past and realize that we're better people than that, and everybody's on the right path. So thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. And I want to just say, I really want you all to understand that this is emotional labor. The stuff that these students are sharing with you is their very personal, right? But they've agreed to come here today to do that. And so I just want you all to recognize that. And also, please don't ask questions like, well, what did you go to prison for? If they want to share that, they will share that with you all. Right. And so the next question I have, and we heard some of it from a couple of you though, what was your pathway to education? How did you find education? And so we can popcorn this, or if you all would like me to go in order again, what do y'all think? Go in order?
Yeah, sure, that works.
Okay, so go, Gail.
So I've had a challenging experience with education my whole life. I moved around a lot when I was younger. Every year I was starting a new school, and it gave me a lot of anxiety. So I dropped out when I was really young, and I started committing crimes and making horrible choices for my life. And by the time I was 15, I was sent to the adult women's prison with a 50-year sentence. I never thought I was going to get out of prison. And back then in the 90s, at least in the women's prison, there were no higher educational opportunities for us. And so I spent my days lost. I had no idea what to do with my life inside a prison like that. And I was fighting the system. I was fighting myself. I spent almost my entire first 10 years in segregation. And then I realized I wanted something different. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life like that, even though I was going to be in prison, so I thought. And so me and some of the other women, with the help of volunteers, professors that would volunteer their time, Gilda Shepherd from Evergreen and some other professors got together, and we created the Freedom Education Project of Puget Sound. And we were able to develop a higher education system. I think that, so you're talking about like the buy-in with DOC and education. And I think that a lot of things that people fail to realize or articulate is that not very many people understand the significance of wanting to educate people that have either life sentence or are going to be in prison for a very long time. Like, what's the point? We have people getting out of prison. We need to dedicate the resources towards them. But I think what people fail to realize is that a lot of times laws change. Like, I wouldn't be here today if the law didn't change a couple years ago regarding juveniles. And even if I wouldn't have been released from prison, the long-termers within prison, they're the ones that the youth look up to when they come in and out all the time. And so if we don't educate people that are a dominant force within the prison, it's going to keep perpetuating the cycle of toxicity in there. And so by us being able to, agree with DOC and agree with, some of the administrators in allowing long-termers to even partake in the education program, we were able to completely change the culture of the prison. And so I think that's something that needs to be talked about a lot more. And so education, I was super insecure and felt inadequate in the first few classes I taken. I had never been educated. And I think that that's where I learned how to use my voice and learn that even if my opinions aren't shared, I still have a right to express them. And I just want to be able to, like, getting released a year ago, and especially during COVID, like, I'm still having a lot of problems with anxiety of learning, like, everything's new out here for me. And but I know how important it is that when I was young and I was in trouble, I was looked at as a predator. Youth were predators and they needed to be sent to prison for life. And nowadays, prisons are built today based off of third grade test scores. And so once again, we're looking at our youth to determine how many people we're going to put into prisons. And I know that education is really important. And so, sorry, I know I went on a, okay, I'm done.
No, that's what we're looking for, Gail. And thank you for the amazing work that you were able to do behind bars, right? So many people with those long-term sentences are creating these great organizations inside. So we got Inside Black Prisoners Caucus, right? And that was men who were sentenced to long sentences, but wanted education, but the DOC wouldn't provide it for them because they weren't close enough to the door, right? The education programs that were there, usually you got to be like 7 years to the gate before you qualify, right? And so they came together and started teaching themselves, right? And now that started in Paris, I think the BPC started in Callum Bay, right? And so now, though, I think they're in almost all the prisons and including the women's prisons now. And so
I want to say Monroe.
Monroe, was it Monroe? Could have been.
Monroe.
And so, but anyway, yeah, now that thing is taken off, and it's this amazing program that they're doing from inside, and it's not just for Black people, right? And one of the things that you see, if you all got a chance to watch Gilda's film, is how education is breaking down the racial politics, right? Because once people start getting educated, this goes back to what I was saying earlier, racism as a tool used to keep us divided, right? And if we don't understand these structures and how these things are done, these politics, right, then we just kind of fall for it. And like with my education, I was able to give context to my experience with poverty, with incarceration, with racism, right? And so now you can't fool me twice, I know, right? And so anyway, so next up is Paris.
So I'll just add to what JJ said before I start. The BPC, Black Prisoners Caucus, is also known as Building Positive Communities. You know, a lot of stigmas come with the Black Prisoners Caucus, and the goals that are set up is to build positive communities and leaders and basically affect your community in a positive way. And it doesn't matter your color or what you believe in. My educational pathway, my first incarceration was when I was 9.5 years old. I just turned 40. So I've been incarcerated from 9.5 till now. The way that the system was set up for me was you've committed a felony, so therefore you go to juvenile services. On and off, my probation officer, because I was a at-risk youth, would incarcerate me every month or every other month. And so that happened until I got my 26 years and 11 month sentence, which sent me to prison. When I got incarcerated, I had a struggle with identifying with how in the world am I going to do 27 years and I've only been living 19 years. That concept was unreal to me. So I sat in my prison cell and I told myself that I have to change the way that I think in order for me to get better results. I went to enroll in a class, and they told me, due to your sentence structure, you can't get in the class. Me being the person that I am, I was that committed to changing the way that I viewed the Department of Corrections and the police force, and I wasn't going to be denied. So instead of being able to enroll in a class, I actually volunteered for a class. I got a job as a TA. So even though I wasn't getting the credentials for taking the class, I was actually taking the material. Over a time period, my boss said, "Why don't you take the class?" And I said, "Well, there's a policy that says if you have more than 7 years, you can't take the class." I then got him to support me in trying to get me in the class. I took a class that was a 24-month course, and I did it in 6 months. My integrity became in question because they said, it's impossible for you to do this. You must have cheated. And I said, you can test me on all the material if you would like again. But for me, I had put a tremendous amount of work into doing what I believed was best for me, which was learning something new versus growing up on the hilltop of Tacoma. The social construction of identity there is you're going to either be a blood or you're going to be a Crip. You're going to represent your neighborhood. The concept of going to school and going to college, that's not on the minds of kids of my era. So I overcame the struggle of feeling like I was being accused for not putting in hard work. I took another class. I was out to show them that I was as smart, even though I didn't recognize how intelligent I was. So I took another course, technical drafting, and that's a 24-month course, and I did it in 7 months. And I then took welding, and then I took roofing and siding. Then I became a facilitator in most of the offender change programs within the DOC setup. And I progressed to today, which I'm an engineer working in Tumwater, Washington, with a good job while I'm still on home monitoring.
Thank you, Paris. And so Paris, you up there in the Tacoma program are so blessed to have Paris up there, right? Because what he brings, right, his experience, he's from that community, right? He was impacted by all the things that we had talked about, right? The socioeconomic issues, right, that give people, poor people, people of color, a different set of choices, right? And so a lot of times people talk about, oh, well, they should have made, better choices, basing that on their privilege, right? And their set of choices, which look a lot different than people in these neighborhoods. So I always have to qualify when I say, well, I took responsibility for my choices and decisions with that by saying, but they looked a little bit different than those of you with more privilege, basically. So thanks for that, Paris. And so next, Tim. And I know you kind of talked a little bit about it, Tim, but if you want to give us more, that's cool.
So my struggle, education, started probably from when I was born. I grew up in foster care my whole life. I didn't have a mom or a dad growing up as a kid. I was always put in homes with people that I couldn't identify myself with. Those people usually being Caucasian, and me being mixed. I couldn't trust. I couldn't communicate with anybody. I didn't feel like anybody understood me. So from an early age, they said I was like retarded, and they'd like put me in classes because I wouldn't talk to anybody. They always had me in the special ed classes, and I get made fun of every day at school. It really, as a kid, it just kind of didn't have much of a childhood. I didn't feel. I was always angry. I was always acting out. No one ever really talked to me, I don't feel. So their way of dealing with that was giving me medication. I would tell the doctors, it didn't make me feel good or make me feel weird. And, I was wet in the bed all the way till I was like 10 years old because of the medication. So my foster parents, they would just beat me, or they just would neglect the fact that I was, having the issues that I was having because of the medication. 3rd grade, I just fall asleep in the middle of class just from all the medication I was taking. So I just, had a pretty bad, I guess, anger problem, because I just couldn't deal with everything that was going on in my life. And like I said, 10 years old, just had like an outburst at school, and they decided to lock me up for it and put me on probation. I was a pretty big kid, it's about 5'5" when I was 10 years old. So I was the big colored kid with the anger problem. And every other month, my probation officer would just lock me up for a month or two. Then I got moved to another foster home in Maple Valley, but I had 5 foster brothers, and I was the youngest out of all 5. And the reason why I was sent there was because it was for at-risk youth. The foster parent I was with, he was known to take the worst of the worst throughout the foster care system, and it was in a place where it was very secluded, so you couldn't run away. It was a foster home designed for kids at risk, very high risk, to have a secure place to not be able to run away from the home. High school for me, like I said again, there's just no diversity. I mean, I was in Maple Valley, Washington, right near Kent, but in Maple Valley, it's like all upper class. And you go to Kent, and it's a whole bunch of diversity down there. So I used to just skip school. I'd run away and go skateboard, because skateboarding was my only outlet. Skateboarding, helped me help with my self-esteem. It helped me learn. I figured if I could do this stuff that I was learning on a skateboard, I could do it in real life, with skills, whatever that may be, my education, reading, my emotions, anything, So because I ran away all the time and I was on the street, I had warrants out for my arrest because I'm on probation. So when I was 16, I don't know, like, I just told myself, I don't care anymore. I'm done with it all. And, I got into a fight, and because of that fight, I was looking at 25 years at the age of 16. But luckily, I got a plea deal, and I got a juvenile life sentence instead. And, when I was in there doing my time, I was forced to go to school. If you didn't go to school, you had to stay in your cell. So I didn't want to stay in my cell all day. So I went to school, and for me, I told myself, like, I'm not gonna end up like my foster brothers. Like I said, I had 5 older foster brothers, and I just watched them, not graduate high school, do drugs, sell drugs, go to prison, in and out of jail. I have no one, I have no parents, no family. It's just me. And I said, I want something better. I'm not gonna end up like that, like my brother. I'm not gonna end up like that guy on the street. I know how to skateboard. I know how to do these tricks that not everybody else knows how to do. So if I could do that, I can graduate high school. So I graduated high school. I really went out of my way. I would take packets and just stay in my cell for days and just fill them out. And I was able to graduate high school early. And I still had 2 years left in my sentence when I graduated. So because of all the time they wanted me to work, but I said, I'm not gonna work for you guys and be a slave to the system. You can do what you want with me, but I'm not working. I'm not working for 50 cents an hour. So they asked me what I wanted to do, and I said, I want to hire my education. I want something that I can look forward to when I get out of here in 2 years. I don't want to be working for 2 years, you know, slaving in the kitchen with no certain future. Because when I turned 18 years old, I got released from the foster care system. It said they were no longer responsible for me, and basically, you know, go to a shelter and get some food stamps when you get out on your 21st birthday. So I was worried about, you know, where I was going to live. I was worried about, you know, where I was going to stay, where I was going to sleep after doing a juvenile life sentence and just being put on the street because I had no family or anything. Like, it was terrifying. I was scared, you know, so I told myself, you know, I got to do something. So when I do get out, it won't be as bad. I connected with some of the mentors when I got out that I took classes with in the Gateways for Incarcerated Youth program. And with some of those mentors, I'm still friends with them to this day. We still talk on a regular basis. We've known each other for 7 years now. My buddy, Chris Clatard, graduated from Evergreen, took the Gateways program. We met when I was 19 years old. I'm 25 now. You know, I was going through a really, really hard time. You know, I was living on the street, and he told me, no, come over to my place up here in Olympia. I'm going to Evergreen. You can stay at my house. You could sleep on the couch, and we'll get you in college. So, you know, I was sleeping on the couch for a couple months, you know, had to wait and apply to go to Evergreen. I got accepted. And then, you know, I've been pretty steady ever since.
Thank you, Tim. And so I think Tim's story, for one, I just want to thank you for being so vulnerable, Tim. I mean, you really go in deep, and I know how tough that can be to share so emotionally. But also the resilience, right? In the time that I've known Tim, right, I've watched Tim struggle, but always overcome, right? And I believe you graduate this spring coming up. And so Tim, you know, he's fought through so many barriers, right? And everything. And he turned, you know, to incarceration. So that, I mean, you hear his story. It's, you know, he's overcome. He showed such great resilience and everything. Super proud of you, Tim. And so I think the next question, though, that we'll give, and we'll start with you, Aaron, is any of the barriers that you faced since you've released, right?
Well, for me, the only barrier that I've had is taking the online classes, getting to know the Canvas website and how it's run. Pretty computer illiterate when I got out. Lifelong carpenter, so I can't do classes with a square pencil and a hammer and nails. So put a lot of extra time. You meet with me once a week. We go over things. I appreciate that. There's just a lot of things that I have to learn real quickly. So I try to study in increments. You know, I'll do some work. I'll save it or whatever, and then I'll come back for an hour and look at it for it in my computer. But other than that, I'm getting that down. But that's pretty much the only barrier I have. You've been real helpful, JJ, yourself, because when I have a question, you get back to me right away. I'm at the Olympic College in Bremerton, and they have a really good support network. So my instructors are great. This whole online thing is kind of crazy, but I guess it's what we're going to do for now. But I just want to say that listening to these guys' testimony, I didn't have the juvenile problems, but we all ended up in the same place. But the guys, particularly Paris and Tim and Gail, that have shared their testimony and talked about how they came to realize that they needed the change in their lives. I can't help but think of Malcolm X and the way he taught himself to read. He looked up words in the dictionary that he didn't know. He taught himself a grammar and everything inside of prison. And that was in the 60s. So it was even tougher back then. And so for these guys to think that way out of the box, that they can do something with their lives and get, it's really inspirational. You know, they've slept more than I've been in prison. So I really have to say that you guys are just doing great. I really appreciate you guys and sharing it with me, because I didn't do very long, but for you guys that did some time and in and out your whole life, it's just a sure testament of how somebody can take their insides and look at themselves from the inside and realize that they need a change, and they don't want to go back to that. So way to go, guys. So, thanks.
Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, definitely inspiring stories. And I, like you, Aaron, I didn't go to prison until I was like 36 and was sentenced under mandatory minimum of 121 months. But I did as a juvenile, right? I started using marijuana when I was 5 years old. By the time I was 8, I was in my mom's stash. By the time I was 12, I was a drug dealer. And not too long after that, I just said, I don't need school, right? And everything. And that led me though to eventually, serving on my first sentence, right, in federal prison, 121 months off the top, and so, but yeah, I was just probably lucky as a juvenile and everything not to get broke off, but I did have, I think I did have stronger like family supports and stuff than maybe some people did as well. So, okay, so oh yeah, Gail, let's talk about any barriers that you've faced since you got released.
I think for me, so I did 25 years, and I think the hardest thing for me releasing was feeling so isolated. Like, so of course I came home to my parents, they're 70, right? And there's still this weird dynamic between them and me feeling like I'm a teenager, you know what I mean? And having to relearn everything that's new out in society, I think wasn't very hard to figure out for me. It's the feelings of trying to figure it out like emotionally and mentally. And so if it wasn't for JJ and some of the conversations that we have sometimes, it's hard for me to process what it is I'm feeling when I know that I'm a strong individual. I know that I've overcome a lot in my life. So why do I feel so separated from people? Why is it still hard for me to feel like I'm not as equal as everyone else? And I think it's this conditioning of being in prison so long that everybody you interact with, you're less than and you're treated than less than. And so it's this really weird dynamic after being released, and you don't talk about it because you don't feel like anybody's going to understand what you go through. And most people that you're around every day, they are like, well, why aren't you happier? You're finally home. Why aren't you or what's wrong with you? And so you put on this facade that everything's great and you're so excited and you're so happy. And inside you have so many conflicts going on in your head that it's hard, because especially with COVID, to make connections with people that can relate with what you're going through. And so I think for me, that was the hardest barrier, is not having, I have luckily a handful of friends that have released, but everybody's in Seattle, or so our lives are in these very different spheres right now. And so it just makes it challenging.
Yeah, thanks, Gail. And, feelings are normal, and then it's being compounded, I'm assuming, by just the COVID isolation and everything. And I know, like, for me, when I was offered student leadership, right, one of the things that I said was like, oh, I'm kind of old and they're kind of square over there, right? And it wasn't that I didn't want to be around people that I seen as square. It was because I didn't feel like I fit in, right? But I went for it. That community hugged me in, the Center for Leadership and Service at Highline College, right? They hugged me in, and that really helped me make that shift from that internalized convict to a student and a scholar, right? And so we'll keep, and so we got some things going on with reentry scholars to start doing some of this work, right? To help our students make that shift, right? To feel connected in the campus community as well. So thank you for sharing, Gail. And Paris, Paris, I already know, brother. So what, you want to talk about barriers that you faced so far in your transition?
So after living the hard life that I've lived up until this point, and persevering and, developing this new idea of my identity and trying to fit in and mimic behaviors that's supposed to be that of what is socially normal, being a citizen. I work a 40-hour-a-week job. I go to school full time. And the Department of Corrections, without even saying it, just says that's not enough. You're still a felon. You still offended the community, and therefore you have to jump through these hoops. Forget 245 collegiate credits and an associate's in technology, and doing way more than normal people do. That's not enough. It's a hard thing to bear, I know that justice isn't meant to destroy. The concept of justice, I remember when I was taking my anthropology class, and it was talking about how the concept of judged by your peers, that's never a reality for people like myself. We're considered to be non-citizens, all the way back to the forefathers, and being 3/5 of a man, and all of these different things. Growing up, trying to conceptualize where I fit at in our world, because it is ours. The Department of Corrections continues to say it's not enough. I'm on home monitoring. I stay home. I go to work. I go to school all night, and I find myself in hearings. And in my mind, I'm saying, well, I don't go anywhere. Why? Well, the thing with institutional racism, some people have conscious and unconscious biases and don't realize it. And it's people like myself that have to deal with that on top of everything else that we've had to bear throughout life. It's unrealistic. Yeah, we are expected to do it, and when you talked about the rate of recidivism and the people that go in and out due to the conditions of release are subjective. Each individual CCO has a different perspective on what that means for the individuals that they're dealing with. And though it should be a fair system, it's not fair, because interpretation is left to the eye of the beholder. The person with that power to say that you have to do this or do that determines rather I'll say this differently. The person that is in charge of that power of applying pressure to people like myself feels as though they have a power that's not real. I realize I control my success. Why do people need to make it harder than that? It's a struggle, but I'm determined. And just like when I decided to go to school and do something different, I can't give up now. I'm fully invested. That was 18 years ago that I decided I was going to go to start school, and I'm still going today, so I'm successful. Everything else, I'll leave it to everybody else to interpret.
Yeah, when power, me and Marsha had a little bit about this conversation about when power is challenged, right? It doesn't know how to act, right? And Marsha highlighted the Judge Kavanaugh confirmation hearing, and when his power was challenged, he started foaming at the mouth, frothing and everything, right? And then one thing that I tell Paris, so you all can't tell, Paris is 6'7". Intelligent Black man, right? That is a challenge to white supremacy, right? And they don't know how to handle that. People that hold that power. And it was funny because it just reminds me of a visit I had with Maxine Mims, where she told me, because of being a person of color, well-spoken, strong and everything, that things was going to be hard because power, white supremacy doesn't know how to deal with you, and it's challenged by you. And so, Paris, just, always remember that in those dealings with power, right? And you'll be okay.
And well, I'm gonna say this though: it's fair for a person to have to take that on, because although we recognize that these things or these forces are out there, right? Yes, I decided to commit a crime. I did my time, or I'm doing it currently. But even then, when you get on the other side, you start a new sentence. It's not, I can close this chapter of my book because everybody around you continues to remind you, no, you're still that person. And I say, no, I'm not that person. I'm not a teenager that was a gang member. Right now, I'm a mentor. I'm a activist. I represent my mother, my father, my grandmother's legacy to the best way I know how. That's what's important to me, but we don't get to those conversations because the consistent judgment, it's constant. No, 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 you're trying to fool me. You're manipulating me. You're trying to get something from me. How many times you have to hear that until you say, you know what, forget it. All right, I will. Not me. And I don't encourage anybody to ever give up to somebody else's forces or perception of who you are. Continue to strive for it, man. You will find people that you are closer to having similar understanding to, but we all have different perspective.
Yeah. And you're right, Paris, and none of it is fair. Just even, the structure, right? And so we'll go ahead and get on. Thank you, Paris. To the last question, and I want to start with Tim. And so we got 15 minutes left, and I want to maybe give the people an opportunity to ask some questions, a little Q&A. And so if we could kind of maybe just push right through this last piece. What was your aha moment when education clicked for you? What was that like?
My aha moment, when I got out of doing my time in 2016, that was that whole year was just, it was hell. I thought I wanted to go back to jail because of just how much it sucked. But I told myself I'm gonna battle through it. I'm gonna get through it. So, you know, that year you know, I met my dad for the first time, but I have nothing positive to say about that experience. I was homeless for a couple months. You know, I reached out, like I said, to another mentor that was going to Evergreen. They told me to come down to Olympia, and I was sleeping on their couch. And said he's gonna help me get into school. And when I got that letter back from the college saying I was accepted, you know, I told myself, you know, I'm gonna do this. And that's when everything clicked. You know, I got it to this point. I got accepted. So now it's up to me. No one's gonna do this for me except myself. So yeah.
Thank you, Tim. Aaron, oh, you moved around on the screen. There you are, Aaron.
There, so my aha moment was basically when I realized that I was going to get out with $40 in my pocket and a train ticket home. I was slated to go to work release, but my work release was the first DOC facility in the state to get COVID, so they pretty much shut everything down. I had to rethink my release plan in a hurry. So, you know, instead of getting out and trying to figure, you know, what am I going to do for a job or anything, I was like, I think I've got something to give back. You know, I've been in the recovery programs and AA doing all that. And part of it is you can't keep what you have unless you give it away. So I thought, what better thing to do than become a drug and alcohol counselor? So putting my past experience in college, you know, I studied fisheries, so, you know, that wasn't going to matriculate through very well with the counseling thing. So I just decided to redefine myself. I think I've got a good story to tell. The demographics for me are a little bit different from a lot of these guys that are speaking today. So I've been on both ends of the spectrum. I've been successful, and I've lived on the streets for better part of 8 years. So I think I can, my testimony can reach a broad spectrum of people, and I can, and just help people. That's what I'm here for now. So that was what I thought, you know, that's what I'm going to do. That was my aha moment, is like, I'm going to change everything in the next 6 months and take a new direction in life. So instead of getting out with $40 in my pocket, trying to figure out who's going to hire me for whatever job, you know, construction's my trade. So you know, it's easy to find work in there, but I'm 51 years old. So I was just, I'm going to do this. And sorry. So that's what I'm pursuing now. And wholeheartedly, it's been a real blessing for me to be able to get back to school. So sorry about my phone.
It's all good.
All right.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks.
We'll go Gail and then Paris, and I have to run to the restroom real fast, folks. Sorry.
I feel like my aha moment was I took an international relations class when I first started doing the SEPS classes in the prison. And up to that point, I really had no idea how we interacted with other countries in the world, or even very much about other countries. And I started doing research projects on poverty in some of the countries and their economies. And I think that for the first time, it took me out of my own misery, my own head, my own issues that I had. And for once, I started focusing on, you know, so many societies that people are truly struggling, and all they're doing is trying to find work or provide for their families. And so that was the aha moment for myself. because it's so easy to get caught up in your own nonsense when you're just repeating the same thinking patterns over and over. And so I started focusing on, you know, other things that were going on in the world. And then I think that for me, learning about capitalism was huge. It was like my brain exploded at the realization that systems are put into place for the sole purpose of production and consumerism so that people can profit off of you. And so right now, well, for the past few years, I've been fascinated with research and government policy. And so I'm applying for so I'm pursuing my BA in political science, but I'm applying for the state capitol internship because I eventually want my career to be a legislative analyst. So whether or not I get the internship, I have my fingers crossed, is one thing, but I know that no matter what barriers come my way, I have the ability to be a voice towards policies and laws. And so yeah, that's all.
So for me, my aha moment was when I took ITC and I smashed it. You know, everybody says it, but when I smashed it and I got my first 4.0, I literally was like, this is easy. And I'm not stopping because I liked the excitement of completing something that was towards my own investment. I then enrolled in other classes, and then the idea of I'm giving back to my community while I was incarcerated, being around these men that didn't have an idea or have the idea that I had. So I would use that platform to share with people, hey, look, you know, if you do this, there might be some other opportunities open to you when you get out instead of having to go back to what you knew. And so for 6 to 7 years as a TA, that was the atmosphere that I was totally engulfed in. And one thing that I also learned about myself is it wasn't that I was addicted to things. I have an addictive personality. So I started to reformulate an out or positive things that I could do with my addictive personality that wouldn't put me back in prison or would potentially allow me to get out of prison. And that was pretty much my aha moment, and I haven't turned back since. JJ's still in the restroom.
He's still gone.
Oh, there he goes.
It's funny. I'm sitting there talking and everything, and then you said something, Paris. So thanks for helping me out there. And so thanks for the aha moments. And I think, you know, we have like 5 minutes left. And so what just came to my mind was a Tacoma campus thing that they do when they have visitors or when they have these presentations is a moment to give back, right? And so I don't know if most people are aware of that, but if you are, maybe somebody can model that for the community, a little give back for our students.
What does a give back look like? I would love to participate.
Yeah, so is anybody out there that have done give backs before want to model this for the group?
I can go ahead and give back. I want to thank all of you guys for coming. You guys have been really an inspiration. It's been really great. I mean, it sucks that you guys have had this struggle. Nobody should have this kind of struggle, but it's awesome to see you guys, how you've been resilient and how you've bounced back and you're making a difference, and you're coming here to talk with us to help make that difference. It's been awesome, and I just want to thank you all.
Let me echo that. I'm sorry, I'm multitasking here, but thank you. This was a rich event. We're so happy to have had it and have it on record for people to see in the future. And I want to congratulate all of the students for your marvelous presentation. And JJ, thank you for your research. Not only did you bring us these people, you brought us some facts. And now we have it for further construction of knowledge around formerly incarcerated, currently incarcerated, and what we're going to do about it. So with that in mind, we want to wish you a happy weekend. Don't forget the return to Evergreen that is scheduled for tomorrow, beginning 2 o'clock. It's a free learning and quite a few panel discussions, one that will feature our own Dr. Shepherd as a moderator. She said she's not a presenter, but a moderator. But we hope that you will go and give support to Return to Evergreen tomorrow at 2 o'clock. With that, thank you once again on behalf of Evergreen State College Tacoma. So glad that you are bringing us together, JJ, in your work. Everyone have a great weekend. Peace.
And I'll sit on here for a few more moments if anybody else would like to give some give backs.
Thanks again, JJ.
Rick, I see you. There you go.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in and just say how incredible the last 2 hours have been. And the panel that we just heard demonstrates the power of an education. And it's not just an education that's coming from an institution. Yes, an institution has a role to play. An institution has a responsibility. But what I am constantly humbled by at events of this sort is the confirmation of a strange theory that I have, which is that teaching is a consequence of learning, not the other way around. Learning comes first. And what the panelists just demonstrated confirms this backwards way of thinking about how education works. And JJ, that first hour that you led us through with your scholarship and bringing your lived experience, posing provocative questions, once again, I continue to learn from you and from everything that you do at the college and in the world at large. And I'm immensely grateful for your work. Thank you so much.
If anybody else would like the opportunity.
I will jump in and say thank you, because it really has been a blessing to hear such amazing, incredible stories, really. And I just thank you for having the voice to get here and share that with us. And, you know, it's a learning experience for me to be able to go forward with the work that I do, keeping in mind how I can support furthering, you know, the opportunities in the ways that I can, that you took and had and ran with. And it just reminds me of that quote, speak even if your voice shakes, or, you know, what I'm talking about. Just listening to your stories, all of you, it was very powerful. So thank you for doing that for us.
I want to echo that. I also say thanks to everyone who's shared their stories, and thank you, JJ, for leading this. I'm a faculty member at Green River College, and we're attempting to start a reentry program. I'm working with a student who is struggling, really a person of one. And so I would invite, just share that Green River is here, and should you know people in the community who are coming out and are going to reside in an area near Green River, that Green River is open and developing a program to support people. I also want to suggest or ask a question that maybe foster youth could be considered system impacted, because it really seems like the state did not prepare Tim for anything, and that Tim's success really is representative of Tim rather than the state. The state failed Tim as much as the state has failed Paris. And so my thank you is that, Paris, I'm thinking about ways that I can sort of speak up and sort of get behind laws that will sort of make it easier once you're on the outside to not be monitored and all that bullshit that comes with the state. And so I'm thinking about that. And thanks, everyone.
Hey, Mark, can you put your email in the chat for me?
Will do. Thanks.
Thank you.
I just want to thank everybody for coming today and being as vulnerable as you are or as you were. I'm also an injusticely involved individual, and it's an extremely hard situation to come through. But being a part of this community and knowing the community conversation is happening, not only at my college, I'm at Seattle Central. I'm actually a peer navigator in our student support services. Getting the bachelor's, doing all that great stuff. But it was absolutely amazing to be a part of another conversation in regards to incarceration, how it looks, how it feels, and the systematic issues. So I just wanted to thank you all for, number one, having me here and doing what you do.
Yeah, if I can, JJ, I'd love to just say thank you to everybody, all the panelists for coming today. And for sharing your stories and for JJ, always being, persistent, continuing conversations and being a support system for folks. And we just want to also extend, I know that the pandemic has made, everybody feel even more isolated, and especially with everything that all of you have gone through and experiencing the isolation of returning to community, that you're all Gooey Ducks and you're a part of the Gooey Duck family, and we love having you. And so, I work for the graduate programs at Evergreen, and so, feel free to reach out to the graduate programs anytime for support. And we love to encourage our students with professional development and provide resources for students. So definitely reach out to us anytime. I'll put my email in the chat, and I can put a link to one of the resources that my program in particular curates for our environmental studies community, which we always put like scholarships and internships. And I'm really excited for you, Gail, for the legislative internship opportunity. That is a really, really great opportunity. A lot of our students have gone through it and they absolutely love it. So I think you'll really enjoy it. So but yeah, I'll just put my information in the chat, reach out anytime. And it was great to see and meet you all.
Thank you, Avery. Miranda, thank you too. Can you put your information in the chat as well?
What do you want from me?
I want to have your contact so I can reach out to you if I have students coming your way.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to do a give back while they're still here? Okay, well, I will give a give back to
JJ, let me
okay, go ahead.
I just want to thank everybody for all the instructors and everybody that wasn't that wasn't on the from the incarcerated students panel, to just want to express my gratitude for you guys sticking around, listening to us and giving us feedback on what we're doing. It really is uplifting. And I'm looking forward to something else like this in the future. So thank you all.
Thank you, Aaron. And so I wanted to give you all some give back. Well, everybody, first of all, thanks for the community for showing out so strong to listen to this important work that was presented, right? And dig deeper, I encourage you, but also to come support these students and hear what they have to say, right? And I want to thank Gail, Paris, Tim, and Aaron for coming in and being vulnerable, right? To share, your perspectives and your stories and everything. And I understand that, because I've been doing this, right? And this emotional labor, it's hard at times, and it can be draining and a lot of different things. And so I am so excited for you all, right? Tim, you're an upperclassman now. And so you know, if you could come to our workshop on the 21st and represent, you know, the upperclassmen to our new students that are coming, Paris, Gail, Aaron's over at just, you know, to come support, to come mentor and everything. We would love that. And so, yeah, y'all are awesome. And I'm so excited to be able to continue to be a part of your education and your lives. So thank you so much.
Can you send that, the link to me for that so I can attend it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
JJ, you've been there for me through everything. So whatever you need, just hit me up.
Thank you, Paris.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to briefly thank everybody for showing up and allowing us the space to feel like we can share our stories. And I especially want to thank JJ. I have this passion to want to be part of change. And sometimes it's so hard when you don't know how to articulate yourself yet out here, or with COVID, you can't even meet people and you can't even get to organizations. So he's been a blessing in my life. And I really, really enjoyed this opportunity. So I hope that there'll be more things like this in the future.
I just want to thank you, JJ, you know, for putting all this together and doing the hard work that you do, because without you, this wouldn't be happening. Also, I just want to thank everybody else for sharing their story and being vulnerable, because, you know, it's hard, you know, it's like JJ said, it's draining. Like, I'm already drained, you know, I'm having memories, PTSD, but it is what it is, you know. So I just want to thank you all, you know, for doing this with me too, because, you know, it makes me not feel alone.
Yeah, Tim, we're with you.
So I apologize for being rude to everybody else. Thank you for listening. I put it in the chat, but I'm there for JJ, but I'm here for the community. So anybody that needs assistance in anything that you're doing, I'm gonna definitely try to make time in my busy schedule to make sure that everybody gets the support they need, because we're all a community.
Yeah, one more.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Anybody has any like questions or wants to reach out, you know, you can get my contact information from JJ. Just make sure you you know, you send me a message before you, because I don't pick up the phone for people I don't know. So that's it.
Thanks.
I just wanted to add a short thing about how I think you were all really articulate in telling your stories. I mean, I want to emphasize that because I don't want you to stop telling your stories. It was good. It was really good. And I'm sure it's hard, and take care of yourselves today.
Thank you, Lily. And so it's lunchtime, y'all, and I'm 10 minutes into my lunch. And so I'm going to bounce and thank everybody for coming. Thanks everybody for coming. It was good to see your faces, and have a good weekend. Peace.